She opened the door for pizza and found the man who would change everything. "Black pizza delivery man," she whispered. "I need extra spice. A slice of you tonight." He smiled. "I deliver dreams." Copper light slipped through Vanessa Monroe's 12th floor windows, striping the marble island. Portland's bridges winked. Her laptop glowed with forecasts she'd already won. 29, thick and curvy and meticulously composed, she could quantify every client's desire, except her own. It wasn't dinner she wanted. It was the ache that arrived when the inbox went quiet and the bed stayed cold on one side. She opened a delivery app and scrolled past the polite places until a bolder name caught her eye. Spice and Soul Pizzeria. Reviews swore their basil lime drizzle made grown men forgive their fathers. Absurd. And it made her laugh. She ordered a margarita with extra spice and a roasted pepper flatbread. In the notes, impulsively, "Surprise me." By the time the elevator chimed, golden hour had thickened into amber. Vanessa answered the knock in a slip and a shoulder-slouch sweater she didn't fix. The hallway narrowed around the man at her door. Tall, 6'2", maybe, carrying an insulated bag like it weighed nothing. Deep brown skin the light adored, eyes steady and alive. His presence felt like a finished sentence. "Vanessa Monroe?" His voice was velvet edged with gravel. "That's me." I aimed for breezy and heard the tremor. "You're, Spice and Soul?" "Darius," he said, smiling without auditioning for a tip. "Friday shift, miracles extra." She laughed. "On time, that qualifies." "We train under saints," he deadpanned, then checked the receipt. "Margarita, extra spice, roasted pepper. Note says, surprise me. Brave." "Is it?" "Depends what you're asking for." The air brightened. She should have signed, tipped, and shut the door. Instead, she leaned closer, catching smoke, citrus, and something warmer. The dare rose before she could stop it, outrageous and honest. "Black pizza delivery man, I need extra spice. I need a slice of you tonight." For a breath, the building fell quiet. Darius didn't flinch or smirk. His gaze warmed, listening. He set the bag on her island and slid the receipt forward with professional calm that tightened the heat instead of cooling it. "I deliver orders," he said quietly. "Sometimes pep talks, sometimes hope." The corner of his mouth lifted. "Mostly I like delivering truth that tastes good." "Truth?" she asked, pen hovering. "That you're not asking for a stranger so much as a life that doesn't clock out when the invoice posts. Heat that lasts beyond the oven door." She signed, aware of the tremor in her hand. "You read everyone like this?" "Only the ones who can take it. Only the ones who look at that and still feel hungry." Hungry. Yes. The words settled under her ribs. "Come in," she heard herself say. "Just for a minute." He hesitated. She liked that. Then stepped just over the threshold, the way careful people do in sanctuaries. He opened the boxes. Tomatoes, char, and green hope filled the room. A pale ribbon from a squeeze bottle, lime and basil, lifted like a bright prayer. "This is the surprise?" she asked. "This is the part that makes people text their exes. Eat cautiously." She bit. Crust shattered and yielded. The heat bloomed instead of burned. Her eyes closed. When they opened, Darius watched her the way chefs wait for the truth to arrive. "I hate you," she laughed when he did. "Ridiculous." "Honest," he corrected. "Ridiculous is the surcharge." She tipped far too much and didn't take it back. "Tell me one more truth before you go." "I'm saving for my own place. Not just pizza, food that feels like home to people who never found one. And I'm raising my nephew. He keeps me brave." A pause. "That's two truths. I owe you a mystery next time." Next time? Faster than restraint. "If you want one." Her phone lit. Chad. "Dinner at the club tomorrow? Wear navy." She watched it blur and didn't pick up. "What's the mystery?" What it would cost you to let your life be messy for a while. I'm very tidy. So's fear, he said, gently enough not to bruise. They walked to the door because etiquette disarms goodbyes. At the threshold, he paused, eyes warm under the hall light. You asked for extra spice. I'm not on the menu. Softer. But I'm rooting for you to order something that scares you, even if it's just telling someone no. The elevator chimed. He raised a hand and left with basil lime and steadiness. Vanessa leaned against the door and let quiet settle. She carried a slice to the window where the river stitched the city into bright seams. The ache under her ribs didn't shrink. It changed shape. Named. Hungry for a joke that isn't networking. Hungry for hands that aren't performance. Hungry for a man who turned a hallway into a confessional. She looked around her immaculate kingdom, curated art, status furniture, spotless counters where nothing simmered longer than a proposal, and pictured a mess. Flour on her wrists, a boy's backpack by the door, laughter while emails waited. Terrified by how much she wanted it, she found a small folded card under the receipt. Thank you for trusting our heat. On the back, in tidy pen, real spice is a choice, not an accident. D.K. She tucked it away like a secret. One day she'd need proof that someone saw her hunger and didn't shame it. Someone asked the question no client could. What would it cost you to let your life be messy for a while? Vanessa watched the bridges blink as day let go. She whispered to the river and to the part of her that kept doors locked, extra spice, testing the words like a dare. Next time, bring the mystery. A phone buzzed unanswered. In the quiet, she decided not to be tidy in the morning. She pulled the sweater back up, then let it slip again, practicing imperfection like a language she might someday speak fluently, syllable by syllable. Morning made everything in Vanessa Monroe's penthouse look sharper and emptier at once. The glass table she'd hunted down in Milan gleamed without fingerprints. The framed magazine cover that once made her chest expand, Portland's 30 Under 30, threw back a smile she no longer trusted. She ground espresso, watched milk rise in a quiet cyclone, and waited for the taste to mean something. It didn't. She tried to drown the feeling in tasks, reply all to 3 threads, approve a budget, skim a pitch deck. Each click landed like a pebble in a well with no water. The only thing that came back was the echo of a voice in her doorway the night before, low, even, unafraid of silence. Fears tidy. She shut the laptop. 3 times before noon, she opened the Spice and Soul app and closed it again, scolding herself for behaving like a teenager with a crush. On the 4th, she typed her address, selected the margarita, toggled extra spice, and, after a breath that felt longer than the Columbia River, added a note. If possible, same driver as yesterday. The app didn't promise anything. It blinked back a polite, neutral confirmation. Her heart misbehaved anyway. When the knock came, she told herself it could be anyone. She smoothed a sweater over her hips and pulled open the door. Darius stood there in a dark polo that fit like it belonged to him, not the job. Beside him, a boy hovered with a tablet and determined eyes, the same warm brown as Darius's, but quick with a different energy. Eager, watchful, a little shy and not wanting to be. Ms. Monroe, Darius said, noticing, not presuming. Brought an assistant today. This is Malik. The boy stepped forward with a formal little nod. Good afternoon, ma'am. Vanessa's mouth curved without permission. Please tell me you're not actually this professional all the time. Only when I'm on duty, Malik answered, and the corner of his mouth tilted, revealing the child under the seriousness. Uncle D says a good business is 90% greeting and 90% follow-through. That's 180%. Exceeding expectations, he deadpanned. Darius shook his head. He'll run payroll and overthrow me by 7th grade. They crossed to her island. Steam lifted when Darius cracked open the box. Lime and basil peeled up from the heat and slid through the room. Malik checked the order against the tablet in neat, small script.
Vanessa watched his concentration and felt something in her chest rearrange itself. "You're really training him," she said. "And he's really training me. Patience, mostly. The rest is inventory." Vanessa hesitated. She wasn't used to asking for anything personal. It always felt like a transaction in disguise. "May I ask, do his parents?" "My sister," Darius said gentler now. "Last year. I promised her he'd grow up knowing how to stand up and how to stand with." "I'm sorry," she said, and meant every word until it felt too small. "We're okay. Grief's like heat. You don't beat it by pretending it isn't there. You work with it." Malik glanced up from the tablet. "Uncle D says the trick is to use it to cook, not burn." Vanessa swallowed. She remembered the immaculate detachment her own parents prized, the way feelings were repackaged into acceptable stories for galas and newsletters. A boy talking about grief like it could build something felt indecent and holy at once. "You said you have a dream," she said to Darius, the words out before she decided if she had a right to them. He didn't make it grand. "A real kitchen. We'll call it Spice and Soul. Food that makes people remember their favorite version of themselves, and a room in the back where kids like Malik get help with homework, job fairs on Saturdays, microloans posted on a board with handshakes attached." Malik made a face. "No handshakes for loans?" "Okay," Darius conceded. "Contracts that feel like handshakes." Something inside Vanessa, tuned for years to recognize market stories and brand arcs, sat up. The picture formed all at once, a room with scuffed floors and incredible light, the hum of voices that came to belong, a board with names and phone numbers, not just QR codes. She could see herself in it and didn't know whether that scared her or steadied her. Her phone vibrated twice on the counter where she'd left it. She knew without looking. Dinner at the club, 7 p.m., wear navy. Don't talk shop, from Chad, punctuated with a thumbs up, as if he'd issued helpful instructions to a valet. She flipped the screen face down. "Do you like working up here?" Malik asked, suddenly, nose wrinkling at the view. "It looks like a desktop background." Vanessa laughed, startled and clean. "You are going to be impossible at 16. "I already am," he said. Then with that little bow again, "Thank you for the tip." "I didn't." She glanced at the receipt, then back at Darius. "You didn't have to. Doesn't mean you didn't want to. There's a difference I pay attention to." She looked at him then properly, not through the lens of novelty or shock. He met her gaze with that quiet steadiness again, like a man content to be understood slowly or not at all. Something low in her belly tightened. "I asked for the same driver," she said, the admission turning her cheeks warm. "I noticed," he said mildly, as if he hadn't just become the axis her day turned on. "You'll keep getting me if our routes line up." "And if they don't?" she heard herself ask. "Then you'll get someone else. And maybe you'll still be brave enough to order the thing you actually want." "What's that?" "Chaos," he said, not teasing. "The kind that makes room for you." It would have been a perfect exit line. He didn't use it as one. He let the words hang without pushing. When they did step toward the door, Malik stuck out his hand again, formal and sweet. Vanessa shook it. The boy's palm was small and warm and determined. In the doorway, Darius paused. "You can call the store and ask for me if you need to, but you don't need me to make a different choice. You know that." "I know a lot of things I don't do," she said, half joking. "Knowing without doing is just trivia. You don't strike me as a trivia person." After they left, the space felt too large and not large enough. Vanessa ate standing up, like she couldn't trust her body to sit. The lime lifted, the basil smoothed, the heat settled and spread. She put the empty plate in an empty sink and stared at her reflection in the oven door until she looked like a stranger who might be honest with her. At 6:30, she slid into a navy dress because it was easier than the conversation she didn't want to have. The Portland Yacht Club had the same old brass and practiced laughter as every place her parents approved of. Chad kissed a cheek without seeing her, dragged a chair for her the way you park a car. He ordered for both of them. "How's the big account?" he asked, eyes going back to his phone. "Strong?" she said. "Excellent. Keep the messaging aspirational. Avoid getting political." He sipped his scotch. "Speaking of which, I heard you've been trying some eclectic restaurants downtown." She smiled with her mouth and not her eyes. "I ordered a pizza." He gave a half chuckle. "Cute. Just remember who you are in rooms like this." She let the silence sit, long enough to become a mirror. When he finally looked up, she said, "What if who I am doesn't fit the room?" He blinked, confused by questions without answers attached. "Then buy a bigger room." On the drive home, she turned off the radio and listened to her pulse. At a red light, she opened her clutch and found the folded receipt from earlier. There was a line under the total, in tidy pen, "Choose your heat on purpose." She pressed the paper to her mouth like it could steady her. Back in the penthouse, she undressed slowly and left her dress on a chair instead of returning it to its exact place. It felt like vandalism and mercy. She stood at the window until the city blurred and cleared again. Somewhere below, a kitchen was cooling down. A boy was brushing his teeth. A man was humming to himself while he locked a door he hoped wouldn't be the last one. Vanessa turned out the lights and lay on bare sheets. Her mind wanted to sprint, but her body knew a different pace. She placed the receipt on the nightstand, a small flag planted in new ground, and said into the dark, "Tomorrow I order the thing I actually want." In the morning, she woke before her alarm. Not refreshed, but decided. She didn't open email. She didn't put on armor. She tied her hair up, slipped into soft denim and a white tee, and walked out of her building with no plan except not pretending. The sun caught her on the corner near a row of shops she'd never noticed because she'd always been rushing past. She could smell yeast and coffee and rain on old brick. She could imagine the shape of a dining room no architect had drawn yet. The hum
Of Malik correcting a grown man's math, the word partner used with its full weight and without apology. On the sidewalk, still halfway to wherever she'd intended to go, she pulled out her phone and called Spice and Soul. A young voice answered, bright and ready. "Spice and Soul, where heat has manners. How can I help you?" "I'd like to place an order," she said. "For pickup or delivery?" "Ha ha ha, for a conversation," she said, surprising herself with the accuracy of it. "With Darius King. Tell him Vanessa is ready to make something messy." The rain turned Portland into a blur of silver that night, soft light bleeding against the glass of Vanessa's penthouse. She should have been locked into the Morrison presentation, refining slides that could make or break her quarter, but her laptop lay closed, ignored. She sat on the wide sill, arms curled around her knees like a girl half her age, staring at the city instead of numbers. The receipt sat on her counter. She'd unfolded and folded it so many times the edges had gone soft. "Choose your heat on purpose." She traced the words with her thumb, heart thudding harder each time. She thought about the way Darius looked at her, steady and patient, as if he saw not the glossed professional mask but something deeper, and she couldn't shake it. She opened the Spice and Soul app again. Her order was automatic now, margarita, extra spice. But tonight, her fingers hovered longer over the special notes box. She typed, "If possible, Darius," and "If he has a moment, I'd like to talk." By the time she pressed order, her stomach was in knots, anticipation colliding with fear. When the knock finally came, she froze, then hurried to the door. Darius stood there, rain soaking his shoulders, droplets glinting on his lashes. He looked solid, real, impossibly grounded compared to the storm of her thoughts. "Vanessa," he said this time, not Miss Monroe, his voice even and warm. "Your order." She let him in without thinking. He set the box on the counter and the smell of basil, char, and lime drifted between them. They didn't touch the food. "I wanted to ask you something," she said, words tumbling too quickly. "Why delivery work? You could be doing anything." He leaned on the counter, folding his arms, not defensive but calm. "Because it's honest. People are hungry, I bring food hot. No games, no spin. Pays the bills, keeps my nephew in school, lets me save for what matters." She tilted her head. "And what matters?" "My own kitchen. Not just a restaurant, a place where people come to remember who they are. Food, sure, but also workshops, support, chances. A space that tells people they matter, even when the world doesn't." Her breath caught. "You're serious." "As serious as the kid I'm raising, Malik, my sister's boy. She passed last year, cancer. She worked herself to the bone, chasing promotions, fighting for recognition in offices that never really gave it back. Her only regret was missing the things that actually mattered. First words, first steps, real moments." He paused, gaze holding hers. "I promised her I'd teach him different." Vanessa's throat went tight. The confession dropped into the sterile space of her apartment like a stone, rippling through everything she thought she knew about ambition. She'd spent years curating her life into a clean, controlled exhibit of success. And here was a man who wore his losses openly, who still dreamed anyway. "And you?" he asked suddenly, voice steady but cutting through her like a knife. "When's the last time you did something because it felt right, not because it made you look right?" Her lips parted, but no answer came. Every memory that flickered, charity galas, foundation dinners, donations, was tangled with strategy. She had lived her life tidy, the way her family and Chad expected. Everything had been about perception. She shook her head. "I don't know." Darius didn't smirk, didn't gloat. He just nodded, like he'd expected the truth to sound like that. "That's not judgment. That's just where you're standing." His calm only unsettled her more. She leaned closer, almost without realizing it, her arm brushing his. His skin was warm, firm, grounding. The contact made her chest tighten. "What if I want something else? What if I want a different kind of heat?" His gaze locked on hers, unflinching. "Then stop wishing and ask." The room thickened. Outside, the storm faded into silence, but inside, thunder rolled under her skin, her pulse hammered against her ribs. "Stay," she whispered. For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, then restraint, then a spark that made her body ache. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. When his lips touched hers, the world fell away. It wasn't rushed or hungry, it was steady, deliberate, like a man who knew patience was its own kind of power. His hand cupped her cheek, rough and warm, while her body trembled with the shock of it. The taste of basil and lime still clung to her mouth, mixing with him until she couldn't tell where food ended and desire began. She pressed closer, soft curves against his strength, letting herself feel without calculation for the first time in years. Her laughter broke out when they pulled apart, forehead against his, breathless. "That's spice." He chuckled low, thumb brushing her jaw. "Careful what you order, Vanessa. You might just get it." Before the moment could pull them further, her phone buzzed violently across the counter. She didn't need to check to know it was Chad. She glanced at the screen anyway. "Where are you? Everyone's asking. You're embarrassing me." The hollowness of his world hit her harder than any insult. She turned the phone face down. "I don't want tidy anymore," she said, the words steady, terrifying, true. Darius studied her a beat, then gave the smallest nod. He kissed her again, softer this time, before pulling back. "I've got more deliveries, but this doesn't have to be the last one." Her body burned, but she nodded. "Next time, don't bring pizza." He smiled, lingering in the doorway. "I'll bring truth. That's hotter." When the door clicked shut behind him, Vanessa leaned against it, her breath ragged, her heart alive in a way it hadn't been in years. She looked at the untouched pizza cooling on the counter, then at the receipt still on the sill. She pressed it flat against the glass, letting the city light shine through it. She whispered into the night, her voice steady now. "I'm ready for more." For the first time in her adult life, she knew she meant it. Saturday found Vanessa standing under the awning of Spice and Soul 10 minutes before opening, rain ticking on canvas like a metronome. She'd called the night before and asked for a conversation. Now she held 2 coffees and every nerve in her body. Through the window, she saw Darius at the prep table, sleeves pushed up, forearms dusted with flour. Malik sat on an upturned milk crate at the far counter, tongue between his teeth as he sketched boxes and arrows on graph paper. Darius looked up when the bell chimed. Vanessa. The way he said her name, unhurried, sure, cut through the damp and warmed her faster than the coffee. "I brought a bribe," she said, handing him the cup, "and a question." He wiped his hands on a towel, accepted the coffee, and nodded toward a small two-top by the window. Malik angled his paper to block their view like a tiny executive guarding trade secrets. "What's the question?" Darius asked. How much would it take to make Spice and Soul more than a delivery line item? Not charity, she added quickly, a partnership, equity, a space that belongs to you and the people you're building it for. He didn't answer at once. He watched her the way he watched the oven, attentive, patient, unwilling to rush heat that needed time. "You coming in as a partner, what does that give you?" he said at last. "Something I can't buy with a retainer. A life that isn't tidy, a place where my work lifts someone besides a quarterly report, and," she risked it, "you." A flicker crossed his face, gone before she could name it. "This doesn't work if it's penance, or if you're buying a feeling. It works if you're building a future." "Then let me build," she said, hands flat on the table to keep them from shaking. "Let me do the parts I'm good at, business plans, projections, pitch decks. You do the parts no one else can, the food, the room, the way strangers leave as neighbors. We meet in the middle." Malik slid off his crate and appeared beside them, solemn as a judge. "I made a floor plan," he announced, passing her the graph paper. "Quiet tables over here, homework tables there, community board by the bathrooms, because that's where people look without pretending." Vanessa studied the pencil lines, the careful labels, the little rectangle that said stage for readings or music or announcements in neat block letters. "You are terrifying," she told him, and meant it with affection that surprised her by its ease. Darius glanced from the paper to her. Numbers. She pulled a binder from her tote, tabs, color-coded sheets, a crisp story that began with costs and ended with a break-even timeline that didn't insult reality. Lease scenarios, equipment buys versus leases, staffing models, community nights that pay for themselves, sponsorships that don't sell your soul. He read in silence, mouth ticking once at something he liked. When he looked up, the room felt smaller. "Okay," he said. "We try a pop-up. Prove the thesis in a room that isn't your beautiful island or my delivery route. One night. We feed people and listen. If it's smoke, it blows away. If it's fire, we catch it." "Where?" she asked. Malik bounced. "My school has a multi-purpose room. Ms. Ortiz lets people use it if they clean up and don't break the projector." Darius's smile flashed. "We'll ask nicely and offer to fix the projector anyway." They spent the rest of the morning planning. Menu cards Malik insisted he could let her, a donation jar labeled dreams, not tips, a sign-up list for free workshops. Vanessa called in favors without shame. Folding chairs, borrowed string lights, the kind of sound system that made even quiet rooms sound like possibility. When she reached for her wallet after a supplier quoted a generous discount, Darius touched her wrist lightly. "Partnership. We both show up, we both pay." She nodded, grateful and frustrated in equal measure. It felt like learning to dance after years of perfect stillness. The multi-purpose room smelled like pencil shavings and tempera paint. By late afternoon, it glowed. Malik's floor plan, transposed onto cheap tile and scuffed walls, looked like the beginning of a map.
Long tables dressed in butcher paper, tea lights in thrifted jars, a hand-drawn board near the bathrooms that read, "Ask for what you need, offer what you have." The menu was small and sure: 3 pies, 2 salads, and a soup Darius called Rain Day, because it was built from what the market had, not what the recipe demanded. People came because kids sent texts, because neighbors told neighbors, because Vanessa, who had spent years buying attention, asked for it in a voice that sounded like her own. She moved through the room with sleeves rolled and a towel at her hip, checking the heat under chafers, refilling water, introducing people who should have met years ago. Darius worked the open station with the calm of someone born to command a line, lifting, rotating, tasting, nodding. Once, when a tray slid and a tower of plates threatened collapse, Vanessa reached under with quick, steady hands. He glanced up. Their eyes met over porcelain and steam. For a second, the whole room focused into a single point of balance. "Good catch," he said quietly. "Team sport," she said, breathless and grinning. By 7, the room hummed. Kids sprawled on the homework end, trading fractions for pepper flakes. An elder couple argued warmly about whether the soup's thyme was fresh or dried. A woman in a hotel uniform taped a handwritten note to the board. "Need rides to work for 2 weeks while my car's in the shop." And within minutes, 3 numbers appeared beneath it. Vanessa stepped back to take it in, chest tight with a fullness that wasn't panic. She almost didn't see Chad until he was in front of her. Expensive cologne, winter white sweater, the kind of frown that expects an apology. "There you are," he said, too loudly. "I've been calling." "I've been working," she said, gesturing around. He looked, but he didn't see. "This is quaint, but you're supposed to be preparing for the Morrison deck. Investors are in town. You can't be here." "Here," she repeated. And for once she heard the word she'd chosen instead of the word he meant. "Yes, I can."
"This is Darius," she said, "my partner." Chad laughed, a sound with no warmth in it. "You're joking." Vanessa's voice didn't rise. It didn't have to. No. People nearby turned, not from spectacle but from curiosity, a community recognizing a moment when a room decides what it is. Darius wiped his hands, stepped around the counter, and stood without crowding her. He didn't offer his hand to Chad. He didn't need to. "You need to decide who you are, Vanessa," Chad said, in a lowered voice that still carried. "You're not from this world. You don't have to play savior to it. Our clients won't like how this looks." A woman in a hotel uniform passed behind him, balancing 3 plates. "Looks like dinner," she said, without stopping. Vanessa looked at Chad, the man who ordered for her and called it care, who measured success by who had to wait for him, and felt finally no tremor of doubt. "I'm not from this world," she said, "but I'm not from yours either. Not anymore." "You're making a mistake," he snapped. "I know, the kind you make on purpose." She didn't wait for a reply. She turned to the line, took a stack of plates from Darius, and slipped into the rhythm beside him. He didn't cheer or smirk. He just moved to make room. A shift so small and generous, it felt like a vow. They worked until the lights dimmed and the last jar lost its flame. Cleanup was quicker than the mess deserved, bodies learning what happens when many hands decide to be one. Ms. Ortiz locked the projector cabinet with a satisfying click. Malik stacked chairs into teetering sculptures and declared himself CFO of trash. When the room was empty and the night air crept in under the door, Darius leaned against the prep table and watched Vanessa tie a knot in a bag. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Like I've been hungry for years and didn't know it." He rinsed his hands, dried them, and came close enough that she could count the flecks of flour at his hairline. This was fire, not smoke. She laughed on an exhale that trembled. "Say it." "What?" "That you're proud of me." His smile lifted slowly. "I'm proud of you." The room went very quiet. He reached for her and she met him halfway, the kiss unhurried and sure, made of everything the night had taught them: timing, heat, restraint, generosity. It tasted like sweat and basil and rain coming back after a day of pretending not to. When they broke, foreheads touching, she felt her mouth curve without permission.
My place is close, she whispered. He searched her face, the way a good cook checks a simmer. Are you sure? Yes, she said. Not to fix anything, to mark it. He nodded, understanding the difference. They walked out into the damp, Malik ahead of them with a bag of leftover bread like a small, happy courier. On the sidewalk, the city smelled like wet concrete and fried onions, and beginning again. At her door, she turned the tea, then turned to him. Messy looks good on you, he said, and she laughed, and then there was no more talking for a while. Later, when the rain thickened and the windows blurred, they lay in the honest quiet that follows a yes said from the center. He traced a line from her shoulder to her wrist and back, a touch that felt less like possession and more like punctuation. She pressed her cheek to his chest and listened to a heart that had held more than its share and still beat like a drum calling people home. Tomorrow, she said into the dark, we write the deck, the real one, for the funders who want impact and profit in the same room. Tomorrow, he agreed, and we feed the volunteers breakfast, because that's how you say thank you where I'm from. Teach me your grammar, she murmured. He kissed her hair. You're already speaking it. Sleep came like a blessing. Morning would bring emails and a call from her mother, a message from Chad she wouldn't answer, a spreadsheet she would open with new eyes. But for now, the city breathed, the rain kept time, and two people lay in a room that smelled faintly of basil and courage, having chosen their heat on purpose.
The morning light fell soft through gauzy curtains, and Vanessa woke before the alarm for the first time in years. For a moment she didn't move, letting the unfamiliar quiet surround her. No buzzing phone on the nightstand, no agenda already crowding her thoughts. Just the steady thrum of Darius's heartbeat under her ear, his arm draped around her waist like it had always been there. She eased up on one elbow, studying him in the pale glow. The strength in his jaw, the small scar near his chin, the calm written into every line of his face. He looked younger in sleep, but not softer, more like a man who had carried weight so long that even in rest, it left its mark. She touched his chest lightly, afraid to break the moment, but he stirred anyway, eyes opening slow and steady. "Mornin'," he murmured, voice rough. She smiled. "Morning. I didn't wake you, did I?" "You did," he said, then pulled her down against him. "But I'm not complaining." They lay tangled a while longer, listening to the city wake. Somewhere below, a delivery truck hissed to a stop, brakes squealing. She thought of how their story had started in a lobby with a cardboard box of pizza, and how far they had already come from that first exchange. By 9, they were at Spice and Soul again, Malik darting between tables with a clipboard nearly as tall as him. Vanessa had insisted on meeting there rather than her sleek office, and she felt no regret as she spread out her laptop and binders on the scratched wooden table near the window. The community pop-up had been more than a test run. It had been proof. Investors had noticed. Emails were coming in. Patricia Morrison herself had written 2 lines that morning. "Let's talk expansion." Vanessa almost laughed when she read it. A few months ago, she'd have sold her soul for those words. Now they felt like an afterthought, a footnote to something larger. Darius leaned over her screen, his presence grounding. "You're really reworking your whole business around this?" She nodded. "I used to think growth was about climbing higher, chasing clients with shinier logos. Now I think growth means spreading roots. You showed me that." He gave her a look that was part disbelief, part pride. "Don't give me too much credit." "Too late," she teased. That evening, they hosted a planning dinner at the restaurant space they were close to signing. A brick-walled, high-ceilinged corner lot that smelled faintly of sawdust and rain. They'd invited community members, small business owners, even skeptical investors. Vanessa expected resistance, but the energy surprised her. People weren't just curious, they were hungry. Mrs. Rodriguez, a middle-aged woman with bright eyes, pulled Vanessa aside. "My catering company. Recipes, experience, all of it. But I've never managed the financial side. You think your program could help me?" Vanessa smiled, warmth surging through her. "That's exactly what we want to do." Nearby, Malik taped up one of his hand-drawn signs. "Dreams are recipes. Plans are the oven. Both make the meal." Guests snapped pictures, amused and impressed. Darius caught Vanessa's eye across the room. For a second, it was just the two of them amid the buzz. A silent promise passed between. This wasn't a trial anymore. It was real. The first official night of Spice and Soul Kitchen felt like stepping into a dream and finding it solid underfoot. Lights glowed warm against the brick walls. Long tables filled with strangers turned neighbors. The scent of garlic, basil, and grilled peppers wrapped everyone in a blanket of comfort. Vanessa worked the floor with sleeves rolled and laughter unforced, introducing clients who once only knew her in conference rooms, to mothers balancing plates with toddlers, to students scribbling homework in the corner. It was messy and noisy and perfect. At one point, she stopped to take it all in. Darius was behind the counter, apron smudged, movements fluid as he worked the line. Malik bounced between tables with a notepad, serious as a maitre d'. And everywhere she looked, people were connecting in ways she hadn't imagined possible. A man offered free carpentry lessons to a teenager. A young woman pinned a job posting to the bulletin board. A group of college kids promised to come back next week to host open mic poetry. Her parents arrived, reluctantly at first. They stood near the door, her mother's lips pressed thin, her father's eyes sharp. But when they saw the room, saw the joy, the energy, the success measured in faces rather than ledgers, they softened, if only slightly. Diane whispered, "It's not what I expected." Robert said nothing, but he didn't leave either. For Vanessa, that was enough for now. Later, when the night wound down, she and Darius stepped outside into cool air heavy with the smell of rain on asphalt. The neon sign above them hummed, Spice and Soul Kitchen. The letters glowed like a heartbeat. She leaned against him, her curves pressing into his solid frame. "Do you realize what we just did?" He nodded. "We fed people and gave them a room." "And ourselves," she whispered. He tilted her chin up, kissed her slow and deep, tasting not just hunger, but triumph. When they broke apart, he brushed his thumb across her cheek. "You asked for extra spice. I gave you my whole soul." Her breath caught, tears threatening. She laughed softly to cover them. "I think I'll take the full slice." "Good," he said, "because this kitchen isn't built on halves." A year later, Vanessa stood in that same doorway, but now the restaurant bustled like a heartbeat for the neighborhood. Malik, taller now, wore a Spice and Soul t-shirt and carried a clipboard full of schedules. Vanessa's consultancy had shifted entirely, less about courting corporations, more about incubating businesses like Mrs. Rodriguez's catering company, now thriving. Investors from across the region were coming not just to eat, but to learn how to replicate the model. As she watched a crowd of students pile in, laughing, balancing trays, she felt Darius slip an arm around her waist. "You see this?" he murmured. She nodded. "This is what success should look like." He pressed a kiss to her temple. The best dreams always leave room for more dreamers. She looked around at the room alive with voices, possibility, community. She thought of the sterile penthouse she'd once measured her worth in, of the man who dismissed her hunger for something real, of the moment she whispered in a lobby, "I need extra spice. I need a slice of you tonight." She smiled at how true those words had become. Because now, she had both, the spice and the slice. A love story baked into every corner of a kitchen that belonged to all of them. And for the first time in her life, Vanessa Monroe wasn't tidy.